This is Bringing the Darkness to the Light with Catherine Nadal, professional psychic medium.
Today we have Michael Cirile. Michael has had over 48 years experience in engineering, audio, video, studio design, custom electronics design, project management, systems integration, and troubleshooting. He has been involved with studio building, AV systems, live broadcast, and studio design worldwide. Expertise in digital audio production. He has worked for ABC, NBC, MSNBC, CBS, MSG, USA Network, Turner Sports, HBO, Discovery Channel, National Geographic Films, Sony Music Studios, NFL Films, NFL Network, Walt Disney Imagineering, Nickelodeon, National Mobile Television, as well as many others. Many of his clients that he has worked for has been Willie Nelson, David Cassidy, Yoko Ono, Ringo Starr, Paul McCartney, Eric Clapton, Chaka Kahn, Rolling Stones, Tina Turner, Hall&Oats, B.B. King, Janet Jackson, Aerosmith, 50 Cent, Gloria Estefan, Foo Fighters, Joan Osborne, Brittney Spears, P. Diddy, Bruce Hornsby, Bruce Springsteen, Kid Rock, Sheila E., Flava Flav, Ludacris, Robbie Krieger, and the Gypsy Kings. Such a pleasure to have you on, Michael.
Yeah, it's great to be here. We've been trying to do this for a while, so it's good that it's finally happening.
Yes, it's a very impressive resume you have here, and it's really a pleasure knowing you.
48 years, when I think back, is a long time. I started out, as you talked about, all this engineering experience. Originally, I really wasn't involved too much in the entertainment broadcast industry. I started out as an engineer at IBM. After about 17 years there, I had moved on to try to see if I could make a go out of it in what I originally wanted to do in the first place, which was be involved with music.
Oh, wow, yeah. Well, going back even further than that, before your IBM experience, growing up as a kid on Staten Island, what was your first memory of getting involved or getting hooked on music?
Well, I think probably, I think I have to attribute some of that to my grandfather. I mean, he definitely was into audio. He had some pretty nice audio equipment that he had built. Back then it was all tubes. And, we had a nice system there. And at some point when I was, a young guy, probably somewhere around 9 or 10 years old, he had given that to me. His system that was in his house that I would always be looking at. He gave me this tube amplifier that he had built and his big giant speaker. And it was just a big mono thing. And it had a turntable that he gave me. And there was a music store in the corner. And we used to go up there and, go through the record bins and buy 45s and, come home and play them. So, that was my first, experience with like recorded music was basically gathering it up at the local music store, coming home and playing. Eventually, maybe it's a rite of passage of all young boys. I ended up getting a Sears guitar from my parents, and they did get me some lessons that I took for a while but didn't stick with. I was learning, like Mary Had a Little Lamb on one string, learning how to read notes and all of that. So, as a young guy, that really wasn't turning me on too much. And we stopped the lessons. And I just kind of, put records on and plugged the guitar in and tried to learn to play by ear, which I think a lot of people do as well.
Oh, yeah. So what was the music that you were trying to play to at that time?
Oh, I had some, we had some Rolling Stones 45s, and there was some, a lot of Motown stuff, Beatles. I remember playing Instant Karma, I don't know how many times, over and over again. When that came out, whatever that little sound effect they had on there, I just would play that thing over and over again.
Wow. That's great memory. And you also, you and I had spoken before many times, but your brother and you were together on doing music, correct? So your brother was playing guitar as well at that time?
Yeah, I'm older by a few years, and I'm guessing at one point he probably picked up that guitar. It was the only guitar in the house, so he probably picked that up and started. And he had friends that were musicians and so forth. So, they'd get together in the basement and jam away. And I was part of that as well. But, he ended up sticking with it. And he's definitely the better player than me. I'm the engineer.
Oh, wow. So was your grandfather an engineer, or he just was interested in having something, for that, to give you like that? Did he see that in you as an early age, or you think he just gave it to you so that you would have something of his?
Well, I don't know. I think I always tried to figure out exactly how that all happened. But I used to watch him. I'm not really sure what he knew about electronics or not, but I do remember him talking about swapping tubes and, making the amplifier more powerful and this and that. I'd see him take like a radio down to his workbench, and I'd be down there, and, he'd open it up. And I guess it was very common back then for people to, take a tube out and go to the drugstore to the tube tester, plug your tube in and see if it was good or bad. And I'd see him down there, taking tubes out and putting some new stuff in, and all of a sudden the radio would work. I was just mesmerized by that. And I think that really is probably for sure what gave me my interest in, becoming an engineer and learning about electronics, learning how to fix things. I was told at a young age that I was always taking things apart, not necessarily putting them back together. That is a very common trait of all the engineering friends that I have. Almost every person that I know that does, it's been down the path that I've gone down, is when we were younger, we all took stuff apart. Some of us put it back together, but most of us took stuff apart.
Yes, I could see that. When you talk about him going down to the pharmacy with tubes, that's all foreign to me. So when did electronics kind of change like that? Because I have no memory of any of that. So when would you see that there was a big shift with that kind of being phased out for people to be able to kind of fix their, sound systems and stuff that way?
Yeah, probably around the time that I went to school. I'm guessing that I'm probably maybe one of the last generation to really study tubes and, tube technology in depth in school. I really don't think that they probably touch on that very much. I mean, everything is, much different now. So that was probably around 1977. Integrated circuits were, kind of new. And, transistorized things was like, that was magic, no tubes to wear out, transistors would work forever and like that. So it was around that time, around the late 70s, that, tubes in commercial, stereos and radios and things like that. You would see a little transistor radio and it would say 17 transistors, maybe that was marketing. The more transistors, the better.
Oh, wow. So it probably perfected the sound. The more improvements they made probably made the sound much better.
Well, people will argue about that all day long. I personally, I like, tubes have a sound to them. There are really good solid state things and good tube things as well. So that's one of those personal choices. For playing guitar, I like a tube amp.
Wow. So, it's interesting when you speak about your brother and he picked up a guitar and that they would play in the basement and all of that. Was your family supportive of your music?
Yeah. I mean, getting me lessons, buying me guitars. There was a second guitar that I remember going to Manhattan, not really sure where, my mom, and there was some silver sparkly thing that I just had to have that thing. It was a real piece of junk, but it looked like $1 million.
Oh, and that was a guitar?
That was a guitar. That was my second one, and that was also not so great. But but I had that for quite a while. I actually, when I think about that, when I moved up from Staten Island to where I live now, like in '77, I still had that guitar because I remember giving it to a friend up here. So.
Oh, wow. Yeah. It's kind of interesting because I noticed that growing up, when something looked really cool, kids usually wanted it. They may not really understand it or know how to do it yet, but there's something that attracts them to wanting to have it. So it sounded like you had a really fancy one there.
Yeah, the sparkles. I just had to have it.
Wow, that's cool. Yeah. So, you talked about when you worked at IBM, and you and I both had spoken about this conversation, but your brother had a band around the time that you were in IBM. So maybe we can move into talking about that.
Sure. So, like I was saying, I mean, he really took to the guitar and, really good player. And he joined a band with a friend of mine. And yeah, I was at IBM, and what, I wanted to help them, get ahead. I mean, they were, trying to go for it. So, I was interested in the music scene, and I thought that it would be a good opportunity for me to, try to get involved somehow. So we ended up forming a record label, and they had put out a 45 with someone else in 1981. And it was right around that time that things kind of went south with the person that they were dealing with, and we decided to come up with a record label of our own, and we would start to put out our own 45s. At that point, they were one of the better bands on Staten Island, and we had a rehearsal studio called Soundcraft Studios on Staten Island on Bradley Avenue, and a lot of the bands that were coming in to rehearse there would basically looked up to my brother's band. They were called the Schemers, and they were seeing that we were recording and getting the better gigs, and they were rehearsing more because it was a full-time job for them. It wasn't a hobby. These guys. Everybody in the band was just playing in the band. So that was we started having the other groups, asking us, what are you guys doing? How are you doing this? How are you doing that? And one thing led to another, and we started to, sign those guys up and put out 45s of these other bands. And it ended up being about, we had 7 bands total on the label at one point. Six of the groups recorded and put out recorded music on 45s, and one band, we just never got to that point.
Oh, wow. So all these bands were from Staten Island?
No. Originally, yes, but eventually, no. I moved up to Dutchess County, New York, and I had one band. I started advertising in the local papers around here. There were a few magazines. There was one magazine called Music Machine Magazine. There was another really popular thing that was a large format thing, like a regular newspaper. It was called The Aquarian, and that had a lot of distribution. And, I was buying ads in there for the different bands, and I started to advertise for groups to send me demo tapes and, like that. So I ended up picking up a band from Newburgh, New York. They were kind of a funk R&B group. They were called Function. And then some other groups locally around here. Another band called Left Hook. Another guy that's has done pretty well for himself. I think his name was Jason Malletman Taylor. We put out a 45 with him. And then there was another group from up here, the Toy Boys. And the other bands were all from Staten Island.
Oh, wow. So this is around what time? You said early 80s?
Yeah, this all started in, 81. Yeah, 81, 82 is probably when the label was formed.
And how did you name the label?
Well, that's an interesting story. So that was a mistake that I had made when we decided to do this. We were sitting around and we decided we would do this, and we said, well, we got to come up with a name for the label. So, however it went, somebody said, well, let's come up with, how about Deluxe Records? People were throwing out all kinds of names, and somehow Deluxe Records came up. And we said, well, that sounds great. So me being all gung-ho, I go out and have all kinds of, letterhead and envelopes and all kinds of, stationery made up. I get it done. I come back to the studio. And then suddenly we realize that there's an established label called Deluxe Records. So all of that went into the trash.
Oh, no. Oh, boy.
So then during this meeting, we were passing around. There was a bottle of wine that was being passed around. The drummer, Glenn, he liked this wine called Trebbiano. And I guess that was being passed around while we were kind of like, okay, now what are we going to do? Now we got to come up with a name. And now I'm like, well, this has to be really unique, because we can't do this again. And I guess, there wasn't any kind of way of really knowing. We just had to come up with something kind of obscure. And he was saying, like, pass the bottle of Treb. And somebody said, that's it, Treb Records.
Oh, wow. That's so neat. I love
So
that.
from Trebbiano Wine, it was abbreviated to Treb. And there it is.
Wow. So that's interesting. So when you think of the record label, the only way that I always picture it is when we were, I was a kid of the 80s, we would run out and buy the 45, and you would see the seal in the middle of the 45 with the name on it. So to me, that was always the record label, because it would be the stamp on the middle of the actual vinyl.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had that. And we had a logo, and I was reminded, it was kind of good to kind of prepare a little bit this for the interview. I had spoke with Glenn and my brother, trying to remember things and put some things together. And he reminded me of how there is a logo for the label that my brother had drawn. And I thought it was, my brother likes to do a lot of doodles, and I thought it was kind of a random thing. And Glenn reminded me that while we were sitting around that night, that there was a dead mouse up against the wall in the rehearsal. We were in the rehearsal studio, and there was a mouse that had, I guess, died, and it was sitting there by like a wire from a cord that was plugged in. So the logo ends up being a socket with a wire coming out, and at the end of it is a mouse. So I don't think you've seen it, but I'll have to show it to you. But that is the logo for the record company.
Wow, so a lot became that night between the logo and the name, and it all happened that night. Wow, it's interesting.
All happened, yeah.
Yeah. So the different bands that you signed, I mean, I'm sure every band sounded different. Were they all in the same kind of genre, or how would they be described to you since we don't know those bands?
No, not at all. I mean, we had, kind of, the situation back then was like, new wave punk. I mean, Elvis Costello was new, and, you had a lot of the punk bands on the scene. And so two of the groups were definitely hardcore punk. Other stuff you may want to call it new wave. Then we had just regular rock and roll, like AOR rock and roll was like Left Hook. Mallet Man Taylor was a jazz thing. It was he plays vibes. Function was like an R&B band. Toy Boys were like straight ahead rock band, doing originals. So yeah, they were all different. I didn't stick to anything. Just basically if there was interest in with the bands and how everything kind of gelled. I mean, that's what we went with.
Yeah, well, they were probably really excited to get signed. I mean, probably very competitive time at that time to get a record label, to get signed, to get someone interested in them. A lot of people I know when I was growing up, they used to pass around their demo tapes, and a lot of them never got picked up.
Yeah. I mean, obviously I wasn't big time, but we thought strength in numbers was going to help us all, and it definitely did. We did a lot of, I was booking the bands in the different clubs in the city, and we did a lot of Treb Records nights where we had all the groups would show up, and it was just us, even though it was kind of diversified music where you wouldn't necessarily get someone who's out for the hardcore punk to maybe come see someone playing the vibes. It turned out to be a good thing. So
oh wow, that's neat.
Yeah,
so I know that around this time you were working at IBM, but you did decide to leave IBM at one point. So leaving IBM was a big decision for you. So can you explain your thoughts about leaving IBM?
Yeah, things sort of changed up there at IBM, and I had the opportunity to take what they called a buyout program, where they would basically, pay you a bounty to leave, voluntarily. So when I originally got out of school, I was a little naive of I wanted to go into music right away, but I was kind of naive of actually what it would take. So the jobs that I was being offered were moving mic stands, cleaning ashtrays, getting coffee, and working 20 hours and sleeping on the couch. And I'm thinking, no, because I'm getting job offers from Union Carbide, Grumman Aerospace, IBM, and I'm thinking, this is not the way to go. So that was always my dream to do this. At the time when I was thinking about leaving, it was around 1992 or 93, and things had changed in the, technically in the way things were being, production was being done. Things were starting to be digital and using computers, dedicated computers. They were very, very expensive. It wasn't like a PC or anything like that. They just didn't have enough oomph to really get the job done. So they were dedicated machines. And since I had all this, music background, we had been going into studios and doing, using the pro equipment then, because again, the stuff you could buy really, that you could afford to buy, was really not that great. So if you wanted to do a professional recording back then, the only real way was to go into a studio and have access to all that good stuff. I was kind of in the right place at the right time when I decided to leave and look around to see what there was to do. Everybody wanted someone who could repair these complicated computer systems, which, for me was, what I'd been doing all along. Plus I had the audio experience. I mean, I was kind of green in the business of what really was going on, but, I had the technical skills to work my way in. So instead of emptying ashtrays and moving mic stands, I came in at the top of, kind of at the top of the business, which ended up being a cold call to a company called Solid State Logic. Everybody knows them as SSL. They're one of the probably premier manufacturers of audio consoles. And back in the day, their biggest competitor was probably a company called Neve. And it was, you either had a Neve or an SSL, and there were other ones, but those were the two big ones. And, my relationship with them, working with them, basically, propelled my career even to this day, is all the connections that I've made through, working for them has helped me every day since. So.
Oh, sure. You also formed some friendships that you still have to this day from SSL.
Yep. Some of my best buddies, are guys that I work with there. So yeah, that's very true.
Yeah. So the reason why I know you is because of Doug Day. So Doug Day is now passed away, but he and you worked together at Solid State Logic, as well as with Ernie Fortunato.
That's right.
Yeah.
And Ernie and I are still good friends. In fact, I talked to Ernie yesterday. He's at the Super Bowl.
Oh, wow.
He works for, he's moved on to NFL Films, and he's, basically Ernie ended up at the end being the service manager at SSL, and he ended up at NFL Films because they have a lot of SSL equipment there. And, he was the perfect fit for going down there and taking care of all that stuff for them. So, yeah.
That's a wonderful opportunity for him.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
He loves it.
That's great.
So, yeah.
And this is the time of year for it. Busy. So, your work at SSL, when you first came in, you weren't probably doing what you ended up doing a majority of. You came in as a trainer. Is that correct?
I did. I came in as a trainer. They weren't interested in any of my technical abilities at all, which I was very surprised. I know that you and I spoke about that cold call interview. I called them up, and when I finally got somebody, I was throwing out all this tech stuff that I can design this and fix that. That phone was dead. I wasn't even sure if it was working. And I was kind of out of things to say because I used all what I thought was my best skills. And then I said, well, they also sent me to school to be a technical trainer, and the phone exploded. When can you come in? That's exactly what we need. So that's how I ended up getting in there. After a while, when I was there, I think someone had looked at my resume and they were wondering why they were sending people out to fix this thing when I was sitting there. And they said, it looks like you could fix the audio consoles too. And I'm like, yeah, I can do that. So then I ended up being, in the training department as well as the service department. So I ended up doing both.
So that was probably a lucky move in your part, because your training career may not have brought you to all the other things, but to be able to be more hands-on in the other aspects probably gave you more longevity in your career. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, I was the only, I think I can say hopefully that I was the only person in the office that was doing both. Obviously the guys who could fix it, you knew how to use the thing. You'd have to know enough about it to see if it's working or not. But that's different than sitting down with an engineer that's been around the business for a long time, and they're very specific about how they want to work and all of that, and knowing how the tool is used, how the audio equipment is used. I kind of learned on the job from the guys I was working with, the people that I was training, to see how they actually use the equipment. So that was something different about me than the other guys that were, it was very busy. So most people were just doing service, or, there was another person that was doing training with myself. So there was two of us, but he didn't do any service. I was the only one that was doing training and service.
Yeah. So when you mentioned service, just to break it down,
Yeah.
you were being called out on gigs or on jobs or on locations. Is that where you started to do some work for like Saturday Night Live, or can you connect the dots in that way?
Yeah, I wasn't an actual employee for SSL. I was a freelance person. Ended up almost instantly being what we would call a permalance. I basically was there every day, but I was not an employee. So yeah, I would go out on these jobs, and of course the people that were employees really couldn't take advantage of some of the things that I think we were all probably getting offered jobs. It would happen all the time. Do you want to work here? Do you want to work here? They would see you set the console up and train their staff, and then almost always, not always, but often, very often, you would get offered a job. So a lot of times, studio owners, their guy would be on vacation, and I would get the call. They said, so-and-so is on vacation, and you built the studio, you trained him, you know how it works. Can you come in and fill in for him for the week? So that's how it all started, and I installed so many things in so many studios that there was just lots of opportunities like that. So yeah, one thing led to another.
Yeah. So they would remember you and call you back, it sounds like.
Oh yeah, all the time. I was very busy. Yeah. Throughout my career, I've done, kind of came full circle on a lot of stuff, doing a lot of installations. And then, like we were just talking about, there was a time where I was just doing post-production mixing. I was just like so much of that. I couldn't really, there wasn't, SSL kind of was slowing down as the product line changed. So there was, more opportunity for me to go out and fill my time with other things. And yeah, there was a time when I was doing a lot of that. Way back then, there was some SAG strike that kind of really put a big crimp in the post-production industry. A lot of people were had to go non-union, and they were going up to Canada to get work done, and nothing was really the same after that. Prior to that, if you could edit, you could edit a commercial or work. After that, it was really hard to fit in. There was a lot less work going around. A lot of the studios closed up, and it was a lot harder to kind of make it in as a freelance post-production engineer.
Yeah. So that's interesting, because a lot of your experiences kind of brought you into different things in your life. And you and I had spoken, you were involved in The Tonight Show, you had done some studio work, independent projects. There's a lot that you've been, done. What are certain highlights over places? Like, I've never been to Saturday Night Live. I've never seen The Tonight Show other than on the TV. What is it really like? I mean, for the viewer that has never really stepped into a live TV audience, I know at Saturday Night Live and Tonight Show at one point they were filming with live audiences. How is it like in that type of an exciting environment?
Well, definitely exciting, especially for me. I mean, my very first job with SSL, I was pretty frightened about going out there. I mean, my first job was going out to The Tonight Show. That's when Jay Leno was there. And I went out, and I was worked on the show for about a month. And we brought some new equipment out there for them to use. They were already using SSL equipment, analog stuff, and we had brought out this new digital console, post-production, that basically had audio and video capability, and it was all digital, all new. And one person could do what was taking like 3 or 4 people to do in a very large space. And now you could do this on a small console, and it could be recalled, and it was the state of the art. So I went out there and set that up, and we're training the engineers that were on the show, and we were doing production for the show on this new digital console, and that's what I was doing out there for the whole time. So getting all the staff up to speed, and so that was a lot of fun, and it was great fun because you're there every day, and you see the bands come in and the rehearsal time, and sometimes you go up and you could meet the bands and talk to them. And Jay was a very friendly guy. He would always talk to the crew. Great guy. At the end of the night, when all the road cases were all stacked up, getting ready to be loaded out on the trucks, Jay would come out, say hi to the guys, and sit with us and chat a little bit. So he was very friendly.
Oh, so that's nice. How is that similar or different when the vibe of Saturday Night Live?
Well, Saturday Night Live. Well, we got Burbank and we got New York. That was really cool. That's an iconic show, and I got involved with that same way. They had all SSL consoles. It takes a handful of consoles to put that show together. So at the time, that was all SSL consoles, and we were, they were constantly buying the new thing and upgrading. So at one point, we put one in. There's a console that does the audience mix, and they had moved to doing the show in surround sound. That was, kind of a new thing at one point. So this new digital console got put in the department that did the audience mix in surround. So, many days going up there, training people, service calls like that. I became friendly with the guys. I used to go up and hang out in the audio control room sometimes. That was always a lot of fun. And at one point, the operator, the audio guy that was running the audience mix, he was not able to do it for a while. So they asked me if, the same thing like we talked about before. You put it in, you programmed it, you trained them. Can you come and help us out? And I said, sure. So I ended up on the show for, I think, about a month, maybe longer. It's hard to remember.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's neat, though, especially since they had such a high level of trust with you and that you had formed that relationship. I'm sure your great personality also helped, and they wanted you around. So that probably went hand in hand,
Yeah.
Someone's difficult. They don't really want difficult people around for too long.
No, because it's it's a huge team effort. It's a big thing. So that was really great. The show there, it used to, I don't know how it works now, but I think it used to start like on Wednesday. The band would come in, and they'd get the band set up, start rehearsing their 2 songs they're going to play, and then they would just sometimes play just to practice and kind of warm up and like that as they were getting all the camera shots set up. And I learned something interesting about the show. I didn't realize that, and again, I don't know how it works now, but at that time, the show was live at 11:30, but actually from 8, so it goes for 90 minutes, but actually at 8 o'clock, from 8 to 10, so that's a 2-hour slot, there is a live show, a dress rehearsal with an audience that's taped, and then they would chop it down to 90 minutes. And I guess, I don't know, that wasn't privy to the inside, but obviously things that they probably felt didn't get a good laugh, or, the joke didn't go over well or whatever, they would chop that half hour out. And then you had between, that hour and a half until 11:30 to get, basically that's when everybody would eat and do any changes. Anything that had to happen to the live show that was going to go down at 11:30 was done in that time. And then there it went off live at 11:30. So
it's probably a lot of pressure if you're doing tape versus live.
yeah, live is always pressure. There's no there's no stop or rewind.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's
Yeah,
interesting.
when I came from post-production, there was always stop and rewind. But when I got to live, those buttons weren't there.
Yeah, that's where your critical thinking and your training experience probably kicked in high gear.
Yeah.
Wow.
There's a lot of, there's a lot of pressure depending on what position you're in. When you're, especially we talked about being like on the television truck. I mean, if something goes wrong during a live show, you're expected to basically make a split-second decision and it be the right decision.
Exactly. Fix it quick.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Get around whatever you need to do, like right now, to get around the problem.
Yeah. Wow.
Because you're live on the air, so you got to come up with something.
Yeah.
And they're all looking at you.
Yeah. It's pretty interesting, for me. I've been in a lot of studios just from my time with Doug, but it's interesting the way you talk about SSL, that there was more than one SSL. So they must have had them all kind of connected together. It's the way they set up studio space. So when you say 1 is 4, they each had their own job or purpose. Is that how it goes? How would you explain that, having more than one SSL in the studio space?
Yeah. Okay. So when we're talking about it, we're saying SSL, we're talking about an audio console. So yeah, there's a lot. And I'm assuming we're still talking about SNL. There's a lot of input that has to happen. I mean, I forget how many microphones they have out in the audience. I mean, it wasn't like 5 or 6. I mean, there was, who knows? I mean, 30, 40, 50, I don't know. There was a lot of them. And so that was just that. So there was one person handling all of that. You're sitting there, you're making sure that it sounds good in surround sound, and that someone that happens to be sitting directly under a microphone isn't saying any bad things. You'd have to mute that mic. You're always kind of checking for, somebody saying something off color or whatever. So that's that. Then you have the production sound when you're watching the skits. All those people that are mic'd up doing the skits, that goes to a different board because that's one person handling all of that. And then the music mix, you have the guest band and the house band. That was done on one very large audio console. So that was another person. Actually, there were 2 people at the board there because the console was so long that if a change had to be made way at the other end, you'd need an assistant down there to make that change for you. You're sitting in the middle while you're doing the show. So there was the music, there was the production sound, the audience mix, and then there was the final console that basically took a stereo output of the music, an output of the skit of all the dialogue, and then the audience mix. All those things came together on the last audio console, and that's what you hear at home, the combination of the audience, the bands, the skits, all of that stuff. So that's why there's multiple things. It's just way, way too much for one person to even think about handling. So that's
it's incredible. I had no idea that it was broken down into all of those different parts, The final product, the final product, you wouldn't even think all of that is so... They make it look simple, or they make it sound simple, but it sounds really, really detailed.
It is. It's a lot of audio there, and simpler things. Sporting events. I've done lots and lots of sports. That's typically just one console. There are sometimes what we call a submix console, where we'll add during like a playoff game, where there may be more microphones on the field, whatever or on the court, whatever the sporting event is. If it's a playoff game, they'll add more microphones, just like the more cameras, more angles to see, more audio to listen to. And again, once it gets to the point where the main audio guy cannot handle dealing with all of that, there'll be a second audio person with a second audio console, maybe just doing let's say for basketball, maybe just taking all the sounds of the court, the squeaks of the sneakers, hearing the guys shout at each other, the ball bouncing, the crowd going crazy. All of that would be handled by one person, and then that that stereo output would feed into the main board. And that way the main guy didn't have to deal with all of that, because normally there wouldn't be as many microphones on the court. Let's say if it was basketball, there'd be something he could deal with, but not when it's a playoff game.
Wow, I'm not a sports fan, but it's I'm going to look at it with a totally different set of eyes, to think that there's so many mics on the field and there's so much action on the field. So that's really impressive.
Yeah, and then, they're always coming up with new ways of, capturing better sound and getting, better camera angles and like that. Microphones in baseball, there's microphones in the bases and, yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah, the other thing I was going to bring up, you and I have something in common, but I wrote about it in my first book. I had the opportunity to go to a Halloween party at Electric Lady Studios, which is Jimi Hendrix studio, and that was in the early 1990s. And that experience was, for me, kind of life-changing. Stepping into that space, it's kind of like a time capsule in my point of view. It's just seeing the way the studio was set up, the vibe of Jimmy, me being a Jimmy fan. So to me, it was really pretty amazing. At the time of that party, it was a private party. I was invited by Glenn McLaurin, who I was dating, and he was part of Sam Ash crew. And Sam Ash had done a lot of work at Electric Lady, so he just showed his ID at the door, and we were allowed in. But I know that you had been to Electric Lady. You also had done some work with Gloria Estefan's Crescent Moon studio. Is there any kind of experiences that you would like to share about some of these special kind of studio spaces?
Yeah, I'll say a little bit about, same thing. I'm a huge Jimi Hendrix fan. So getting the chance to go there, even if I had to go fix something, it was great. And that's really all it was. I was only there once that I could remember. That first time I had went into, there was a band from Japan that came in to work there, and they had flown an engineer in, and they were trying to mix a concert video, and they were having some trouble with getting the video and the audio to line up. So I went down and, got that sorted out for them. But like you said, when I walked in there, I wasn't thinking about fixing that. I wasn't worried about that. I was just mesmerized that here I was in Electric Lady and, looking at all the pictures on the walls and everything there. At that point, too, they had gotten rid of the original console. I don't know how many consoles were there, but they had an SSL. And then, of course, they had to have a special one, and they made it purple.
Oh, really?
Purple haze. Yeah, they had it. It was a purple console that was custom painted for Electric Lady, so that was kind of cool. That's the only one of its kind.
Wow, it's interesting when you mentioned purple. You just kind of like brought all these memories back to me. His place is very colorful, and
yes,
there's colors in everything, and it seems like everything has been kind of sealed, like all of the artwork, everything is kind of behind plexiglass. I mean, it's very well preserved, but it has such a homey feeling to it. I've been in a lot of studios, but studios all somewhat have the same feel. His place felt more homey. Do you remember that feeling? Like there was kind of like a feeling of being at home there?
Yeah, I mean, it was so cool before I even entered the control room. I never actually, I don't even recall ever going into the recording space, because the job that I was doing was all in the control room, was in front of the console, dealing with the console and the video machines. So I never got into the space where, the recording room, but whatever you want to call it, the lobby area, that was, like you said, all the paintings on the wall and the vibe and the lights. It was
in the
just
hallway.
really,
This
yeah,
artwork all through the hallway and the
yeah,
bathrooms. I mean, it's all over. Yeah.
yeah. It was so cool.
Yeah.
So cool. So Crescent Moon, that was another project. That was in 96. And I remember that because it was getting ready for the 96 Olympics that was in Atlanta. And Gloria was recording an album called Destiny. And I think that song, Destiny, was the theme song for the Olympics that year. So I was there when that was going down, but I was not doing that. That was happening in another room. I was there for probably about a month or so. Um, and what I was doing was brought down some more digital equipment from SSL, and we were dubbing American soap operas into Spanish. So that was what I was doing, basically training people on that. And then some of their music engineers would come in, and I was just showing them how it could be used for music and like that. I did get to record Gloria a few times, not music, but we did a few public service announcements, so that was kind of fun.
Oh, how interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So
I
you were there for the bombing. The 1996 Olympics had the bombing occur. So were you in the area of that, or how was?
I was safe in during '96. I was working the Olympics at NBC in New York City. I was in I think they called it control room C, and that's where when we went live, that's where we were. That was the control room that was being used. My shift then was midnight to noon, and it was just a regular night. We went in there and just the normal Olympic stuff that we were doing, and suddenly the bomb goes off in Olympic Park, and everything just changed. It went from a sports show to a news show, and it was just complete chaos. I mean, you could imagine cameras, people running, the guys that had cameras, the audio, everybody's just running everywhere. So it was like the typical thing you see on TV, the camera's like looking at the ground, the guy's running, it's looking everywhere. I mean, we got that. We had horrible audio, bad audio, no audio coming from everywhere. Everybody was screaming. They kicked everybody out of the control room, all the, entertainment or sports people, and they brought all the news people in the control room and turned it into, now it's a news show, right? Now we have a news event.
Wow. That's
But
incredible.
I'm at the console, and it was just chaos back there. I'm trying to get sound, on the air, and there was two of us in the room. So at that point, both of us were operating the console and doing what we had to do to try to keep up with the action, which was, fast and loose. You didn't know, it was just chaos. There was no plan at all. It was just complete chaos. Did we have video? Do we have audio? They were putting anything they had on the air, trying to figure out what happened. Did anybody get hurt? All of that. So
yeah,
it was a little more than I bargained for that night.
I'm sure. So you started your shift at midnight, and then you said so midnight to noon. So when did the actual bombing occur?
I'm not sure. Midnight, I was there early. I was not showing up at 5 to 12.
Oh, yeah.
So I was there early. I'm not really sure. It was the evening for sure. I know that. It was dark.
Yeah.
It was dark out.
Yeah, I knew someone that was actually down there, and they had experienced that. And then years later, they actually served in Iraq. And one of the first times we heard a bomb go off in Iraq, she was like, I feel like I'm at the Olympics. Like, literally, it was the same thing. People running, not knowing, they would tell you to go to a bunker or whatever, but you are in a combat zone. The Olympics wasn't planning on anything like that. So there wasn't, a shelter to go to or whatever. So I'm sure there was a lot of changes for security after that. Did you see any changes in the kind of audio field, to prepare for anything like that happening again, covering any big events? Was there any kind of like plan put into place? Like, this could be another switch, going from a sporting event to a news event?
Well, I think in general, except for that happened in Olympic Park. I mean, where that bomb went off. So, it was, the park is still there. So, it was just a park where everybody was hanging out, and the Ferris wheel was there, and, whatever other things they had going on.
Yeah.
But normally, just in general, I mean, everything has been tightened up, and you're wearing, special badges that they scan, and it's got a barcode on it, and everything is programmed. And if you're not, they scan your barcode. You could tell them any story you want. If the light doesn't go green, you're not getting in to that area.
Yeah.
But there are people that have to be out, the guys and gals that were covering, action in Olympic Park. Maybe they were interviewing people attending the Olympics. Hey, how'd you like this? Or those people are out there with the general public. But, normally, any kind of sporting event is pretty locked down, especially the high profile stuff like, Super Bowls, playoffs, anything where, people be there's always people trying to sneak in and things like that. But when you're out in the open, you're kind of out there, but you're pretty well protected when you're in the compound, let's say.
Oh, sure.
Security is very tight.
Yeah. But it's interesting when you think back to the 1996 and then you think back to current day. Many times even now, there'll be breaking news where they'll cut into a program and they'll say, we have this happening. Things kind of in the industry are probably changed where they're getting, used to breaking away from something or trying to go to something else, in a quick minute. So have you seen those changes over time, working in that kind of an environment where they've kind of been able to transition quicker or in a better way versus the scenario in 96?
Well, yeah. I've worked a number of Olympics. I mean, one time I'll call it what they call it, Death Watch. So what that was what, I'm trying to think of the hours. Just give me a second. The hours I was working. That was like 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. So I was kind of the overnight person. And this was in Sydney, Australia. So I was doing post-production work there. But because I was the only audio guy in the building during that time, should anything like that happen, they had a whole thing set up in another control room where they had an audio console set up, a camera pointed at a chair, a microphone kind of laying on the chair, ready for if something happens, plop somebody in the chair, and then I was the guy. I would jump into the other control room and put the mic on him, and the camera was there, and I'd go for the board. So I'm guessing that was from having something that we could just go to. It was already set up. All we had to do was put somebody in the chair and me run over there, and it was ready to go. They do make things like that. But you're not going to have anything like that during like a Super Bowl or anything. If anything went wrong there, I'm sure that it would just be total chaos again.
Oh, sure. Yeah. You have such an impressive resume, and early on when I did the introduction with you, I mentioned some, really kind of interesting clients that you worked with, all of them more famous than each other, So what were your favorite or maybe some interesting clients that you worked with?
I think probably two most fun things that I've done. I mean, I really liked working on SNL. I mean, just great people, and the bands, and it was just fun.
Yeah.
It was just a lot of fun and very exciting. So that I really enjoyed, even though it was kind of short. And another project that was the John Lennon songwriting contest, which turned into a studio bus, which I had built, and that started out in 1998, and that was a really fun project. Same thing. I just actually was texting today with the guy who kind of runs the whole thing there. I sent a picture of actually the picture that I sent to you.
Oh, great!
Because that was from a long time ago. So he said, "Wowee" when he saw that.
Oh yeah. Well, that bus is still going around, and it's still doing its education. It's very educational, and it's making its rounds. And you built the studio in that. Is that correct?
Yeah. That particular bus is retired now. That bus is retired. A new bus has been built. They get old. And you got to upgrade them. So yeah, the physics. It's an automobile, right? So it needs to be changed out. So yeah, that bus is retired. and new ones are out there, but the concept is still the same. And I kind of moved that bus from being just kind of an audio only to, I kind of made it from my background of doing broadcast. I had cameras on board and we had video editing. I started to add all of that kind of stuff, a post-production system. And I started with all my connections in the industry. I got a lot of people to sponsor and give us, loan us equipment for the bus. So, because it was a nonprofit thing and we were going out and doing things for free. So, it really helped that I was able to get people to loan us equipment to outfit the bus. So we really took it to, to the next level.
Oh, yeah. That's really amazing. Even current day, I see on Facebook, most recently someone from one of my soap operas, was posing inside the Lennon bus, so it still gets a lot of attention. I know that there's a Beatles Fest coming up, I think, in next weekend at JFK, and they're going to be doing, it's the 60th anniversary of the Beatles coming through JFK. So there's going to be a lot coming up with the Beatles. So I'll be looking out for the bus. The bus might be there. But
maybe.
Maybe, I know. I can't wait to see it. If I see it, I'm going to take a picture in front of it for you. But as we wind down the interview, I know that we're going to end the interview with a song from your brother's band. So do you want to tell us a bit about the song that we're going to end with?
Yeah, well, I figured since we were talking about, the old days going back to the 80s, what we have here is a cut that I found from a club in New York City, very famous, the CBGB's. And this was a cut from March 29th of 1981. And I want to basically give a special shout out to the lead singer of the Schemers. That's the name of the group, Mike Maggio. I just want to let him know that everybody in the band and myself, we're thinking about him. He's had some medical issues, and we wish him the best. And we're going to dedicate this song to him.
Very
the song
good.
is called "What You Did to Me."
What You Did to Me. Here you go for the Schemers. Thank you again, Michael, for being on the show. Here is What You Did to Me.
All right, good evening. We are the Schemers. 1, 2, 3, 4. Sometimes